I'm Carson Horn, and it's time for another edition of Talkin Toomers, where I break down the latest happenings in Auburn athletics. Let's get rolling. We've made it. Well, I've made it. It is time for me to graduate. This is the last episode of Talkin Toomers before I graduate from Auburn University on Sunday afternoon. Cannot wait for that. Very much looking forward to it. As I am recording this episode, I am one exam away from being done with college. I've taken one already this morning, have another one later on in the morning. Decide, hey, I'll come record an episode, the final episode as a student, in between those two exams. This is Talkin Toomers. If you weren't aware of what you were listening to, I am Carson Horn. We've got a fun final show as a student today. I'll have more on where this show is headed later on. We'll kind of close the show today with that. So I'm not going to spoil anything. I'll talk about that later in the show. But I figured, hey, it's the last one of the semester, last one before I graduate. Why don't we do a Q&A episode? So I put it out on social media. You asked a lot of really, really great questions. I really appreciate it. I'm going to get to those on today's show, talking about Auburn players in professional sports, talking about questions for Auburn football this upcoming season. We got a lot of really good ones, but I am going to open today's show addressing a segment that somehow I forgot to, on last week's show, talk about, even though I teased it in the intro. Somehow I skipped over it during last week's episode, so I will address that on today's show. So we'll start with that, and then we will get into the questions. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, I please ask you, please subscribe to the show. If you're listening on podcast, like and subscribe. If you're watching on Weagle's YouTube channel, either way, whether you're watching or listening, I really appreciate it. Okay, so let's get down to it. This is a question I posed. This wasn't a question from one of you, but I do think many of you probably have this question. And the question is, can Auburn fix its red zone woes in 2025? We know Auburn struggled mightily in the red zone last season. It was one of the reasons Auburn struggled overall as a team and only won 5 games. Auburn was 108th in red zone success rate last season. Red zone success rate includes touchdowns or field goals. So what was the reason for that? I think there were a couple of reasons for Auburn's struggles. I think first, I think I'd be remiss not to mention kicking. I think this absolutely played a role, and I think you could argue it played the biggest role in Auburn's struggles in the red zone. Auburn was 12 of 22 on field goal attempts last season. Just think to the Texas A&M game. Auburn made Ian Vachon, who's now on the transfer portal, and hope someone picks him up, made clutch kicks for Auburn in that Texas A&M game, and that ended up being the difference. You take away, Auburn misses a few field goals there, Auburn loses that game, and that did happen in other games during the 2024 season where Auburn was not able to get points in the red zone because they weren't able to get in the end zone and they missed field goals. So Auburn makes a few field goals in the Texas A&M game. They end up winning that game. What if that happens in a few other games last season for Auburn? Maybe the result is different. Maybe you're looking at a team that ends up winning 7 or so games instead of looking at a team that won 5. So it's a big deal. Kicking absolutely is a big deal for Auburn and was a big reason Auburn struggled. Play calling certainly plays a role in that. I am not qualified to say what went wrong or what Auburn needed to do differently play calling wise. Now, I do think Auburn's lack of a kicking game affected Auburn's red zone strategy. What do I mean by that? I think Hugh Freeze probably felt like either one, he needed to be more conservative because he needed to try to get as close of a field goal as possible, or two, he thought he had to be really aggressive because he knew he didn't have a good field goal kicking unit, and therefore he needed to be more aggressive in his play calling to try to get into the end zone. And we know occasionally that backfired. Auburn had turnovers at times where Auburn just simply could not get the ball across the goal line. So yes, play calling and kicking were the two biggest reasons for that. Execution is what a coach would say. We have to execute better. But I would say play calling and kicking were the major two reasons. And again, they relate. They're joined together. The one affects the other there for Auburn. But the question is, will it improve in 2025? So the only way I can really answer that is by going and looking into the past. So that's what I did. I went and looked at the past. I looked at the history of Hugh Freeze and how his teams had done in the red zone. and the results were not promising. I did this with the turnovers, and I said, look, I'm not trying to be a negative Debbie Downer here. I'm just giving you what history has said. That doesn't mean history will repeat itself, although it often does, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the trend of how things have gone, because a lot of times the trend does tell you where things are likely to head. So, Auburn in 2023 was 75th in red zone success rate. Not great, but average. 75th, much better than 108th in red zone success rate. And Auburn, we know, won 6 games in 2023, so that makes sense that Auburn was slightly better, and that resulted in one more win. In Hugh Freeze's time at Liberty in 2022, he was 106 in red zone success rate, 92nd in 2021, 101st in 2020, and 62nd in 2019. That was his highest at Liberty. Going back to Ole Miss, in 2016, he was 66th. In 2015, he was 81st. In 2014, he was 114th. In 2013, he was 110th. And then this was the outlier. In 2012, funny enough, Hugh Freeze's first year at Ole Miss, when they were okay but not great, they were 5th in red zone success rate. So that was kind of the outlier, the anomaly there. But overall, if you didn't pick up on that, the trend is Hugh Freeze has never been great, except for 1 year in red zone success rate. So is that a concern? Absolutely, it's a concern. However, you will notice overall, Hugh Freeze has mostly been better. He's been in that 60s to 70-ish range, which is, again, average. Not great, not even good, but it's average to slightly below average in the red zone. Auburn was well below average last season. So is there hope for improvement for Auburn in 2025 in the red zone? Yes. Do I expect Auburn to turn into an elite red zone team offensively? Absolutely not. The trends do not back that up. There's only one outlier, one time in Hugh Freeze's head coaching career that he has finished top 10 in red zone success rate, and that was in 2012. So I don't see that being the case, but can Auburn be better next season? Yes. Overall, if Alex McPherson is back, and it looks like he will be, that is huge for Auburn's kicking game, assuming he gets back to the Alex McPherson level that we know of when he was healthy. That will help Auburn in getting points on the board. And then, two, if you have a better offense, if you have a quarterback that you trust more this year in Jackson Arnold, if you have a running game and offensive line that is, it's going to be hard to be better than Jarquez Hunter rushing-wise, but if you have a better offensive line than last season, that can help things, helping move guys off the ball, getting those last couple yards that you need to get across the goal line. Just incremental improvements can lead to a pretty substantial jump in red zone success rate for Auburn, and maybe you're looking at a team that finishes in the 60s next year in red zone success rate, and just doing that, just those small changes could lead to a 1 or 2 more wins than you have, which is still not necessarily what Auburn fans are looking for, but it would be an improvement. Okay, that addresses the red zone. Now it is time to get into your questions, the questions that you asked when I posed on social media. I said it could be Auburn related or not. The majority of these are Auburn specific questions, but there are 1 or 2 that are not necessarily that. But I love this first question, and it piggybacks on the red zone. The question is, what is the difference between last season, in which Auburn went 5-7, and this season, a team that can win 8 games? And then is Hugh Freeze capable of that? I want to split it into 2 parts here. I want to answer the first part first, and then I'll answer the second part. And the first part is, what is the difference, just to summarize, what is the difference between 5-7 and then a team that can win 8 games this year? I'll tell you, it's not much. A difference between a 5-win team and an 8-win team is really, really small. It is on the edges. That is how small the difference is here. Auburn lost 5 games last season by 10 or less points. That's not much. That's not much at all. Auburn did not get blown out very often last season. Only a couple of games, not even a handful. A couple of games where Auburn really got blown out. A few less turnovers, better red zone, as we just talked about, and even just a little bit of luck that goes your way, then Auburn would have won 7 games last season. Don't turn the ball over 5 times against Cal. Don't turn the ball over 5 times against Arkansas. Don't throw that costly interception against Oklahoma. And you win those 3 games. And there you're looking at 8 wins. If you just change the outcome of those 3 games versus 5 games, have the luck that you had in that Texas A&M game where you had a couple players make some insane catches in overtime, like Keandre Lambert-Smith against Texas A&M, and you win that game. Have that happen a couple more times, and you're looking at a team that won 8 games last season. It's very, very small. So assuming all else stays the same next season for Auburn, in areas that Auburn was pretty solid. So defensively, assuming Auburn is about the same defensively next season as they were last year. Assuming special teams improves a little bit, like we just talked about, Auburn makes a few more field goals. Assuming the offense does not turn the ball over as much and improves slightly, then yeah, you're looking at a team that absolutely can win 8 games next season. But the caveat there is, we're assuming there's not regression elsewhere. We're assuming there's not regression defensively in the secondary. We're assuming there's not regression defensively along the defensive line where you lost some key guys. We're assuming Auburn can improve their turnover woes. We're assuming Auburn can improve their red zone success rate. And that's a lot of assumptions. And as we know, things don't typically stay the same. A lot of times you regress in one area and improve in another. I do think, however, Auburn will be better next season. Will it be enough to get to 8 wins? I don't know. But I do think overall Auburn will be better. Number 2, is Hugh Freeze capable? I think this is an interesting question because I do think it's a question that many people have, and it's a fair question to have. But when you look at the history of Hugh Freeze's tenure and his success at Ole Miss and at Liberty, the guy's the king of 8 wins. If anything, Hugh Freeze should be able to deliver you 8 wins. History says as much. Prior to Auburn, Hugh Freeze had only won less than 7 games one time, and that was in 2016, his final year at Ole Miss, when everything went off the rails, and the scandal broke, and so forth and so on. You all remember. His average wins per year prior to Auburn was 8.3 wins per season. Again, that's being the king of 8 wins. That's what Hugh Freeze has been in his career, which was part of the reason that some people weren't high on hiring him, because people thought, well, we had that in Gus Malzahn, so why aren't we going out and hiring someone that's very similar to what we had in Gus Malzahn? That was one of my arguments and one of my concerns when Hugh Freeze was hired. But I say all that to say, I think the expectation absolutely should be, at the minimum, Hugh Freeze should be delivering you 8 wins per year, at the minimum. That hasn't been the case in these first 2 seasons, in large part, one, because Auburn has underachieved. Auburn did underachieve last season. Last year's roster should have been better than it was. And number 2, we knew that Auburn had a massive rebuild on its hands. Hugh Freeze understood that. I think Auburn fans understood that. So those were, I think, probably the 2 reasons Auburn has not yet reached that mark. But from here on out, with the talent roster that Auburn has, there is no reason Auburn should not expect any less than 7 to 8 wins. Again, average 8.3. So you're saying if that average holds true for Hugh Freeze at Auburn, you might have a 7-win season in there. But you should expect some 9 wins, some 10-win seasons in there, along with a 7 or 8-win season if you're going to hold on to that average. Can that happen for Hugh Freeze? Is he capable of that? Absolutely. Based on his track record at Ole Miss and at Liberty, that is what Auburn fans should expect, and maybe even more, because you're in a situation now at Auburn where you have more resources, you have more talent than you had at Ole Miss and at Liberty. So honestly, you should expect even more. And yes, to answer that question, Hugh Freeze is absolutely capable. So to summarize the whole question, both parts, the difference between 5 and 7 and 8 wins this upcoming season for Auburn is very small. Minimal improvements elsewhere and everything holding the same in other areas, then Auburn can win 8 games. And number 2, is Hugh Freeze capable? Yes, he absolutely is, and even should be expected to be around that 8-win mark year in and year out. Okay, next question. Moving on, trying not to spend too long on any one segment because we do have a good many questions to go through here. I really like this question. It is not necessarily Auburn, does not pertain directly to Auburn, but I thought it was an interesting question. The question is, what effect might President Trump's executive order on college sports have on the college athletics landscape? So if you don't know what I'm talking about, last week, I believe it was Yahoo Sports or Wall Street Journal, someone broke the news that President Trump was deliberating, debating whether or not to issue an executive order on college athletics. This comes after he spoke to Nick Saban about the state of collegiate athletics and what might need to be done. So what effect might this have? It's hard for me to know. I don't want to just say whatever. I don't know, because we don't know what possibly is in the executive order, if it even comes to fruition. So until then, it's hard for me to say what effect it might have, because I have no clue what would be in the executive order. What I can say is I do think people are recognizing that college sports is broken and it needs fixing. This isn't brand new information. This has been out there for multiple years. Unfortunately, like most things, it has taken forever for the people in power to realize there was an issue and to try to start addressing it, despite voices saying for years that there was an issue. My belief is, and still is, that Congress is going to be needed. I don't know if an executive order will be able to solve all the issues. I think most in this space that know a lot more than me, based on what I've read and what coaches and athletic directors and presidents have said, they still believe congressional legislation is needed to be able to enforce the rules that they would like to enforce and to be able to keep some system of order. So, could an executive order help? I suppose, but it's hard for me to know for sure the answer to that without seeing what is in it and how that might affect college sports as a whole. Still think a congressional bill is needed for collegiate athletics. And overall, as a complete update on where things stand, the House settlement has still not been settled yet. So shouldn't even call it the House settlement, because it hasn't been approved by the judge at the moment. I still think it will be, but it hasn't yet. And that is the first step in all of this before we even get to congressional legislation or an executive order. So I really can't answer that question yet, although I appreciate the question very much. Rolling on now, this one back to Auburn. Question is, who is leading the way for wide receiver 3 for Auburn next season? The assumption is, and it is the correct assumption in my eyes, that Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton are locked down as the top 2 receivers for Auburn. I fully agree with that. Cam Coleman is one of the best receivers in the country. So is Eric Singleton, the transfer receiver from Georgia Tech. Cam Coleman is entering his sophomore season. Eric Singleton, a junior transfer from Georgia Tech. Those two guys are going to be one of the best duos in college football. I talked about those two a couple weeks ago on the show when I asked if Auburn's wide receiver room was a top 5 receiver room in the country. I believe it is this upcoming season. But who is wide receiver 3? For me, the answer is pretty easy, and that's Malcolm Simmons. He was wide receiver 3 last season for Auburn. I don't see anyone taking over that spot. He was a surprise. He was a 4-star athlete coming out of college. Some thought he would even play defense at Auburn, and he ended up being a really, really good receiver last year for Auburn. He was a playmaker. Auburn used him in jet sweeps as well. And I expect a similar role for Malcolm Simmons. Him and Eric Singleton can do similar things as far as screens and jet sweeps. So I'm interested to see how those two are used together in this offense from Auburn this season. But I don't really think it's a competition for wide receiver 3. Assuming everyone is healthy, Malcolm Simmons will be wide receiver 3 for Auburn this season. Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton give you a ton of flexibility with the way you can move those guys around and utilize them in this offense. And I know Hugh Freeze and Derek Nix, Ken Austin, all those guys in that offensive room are going to have a lot of fun figuring out how to use these pieces. So I'll go with Malcolm Simmons at wide receiver 3. But I think another interesting discussion here is, well, what does the receiver room look like behind them? Because last year, Hugh Freeze and Auburn did not rotate many receivers after the beginning part of the year. Early in the year, you play a few more guys, you start to figure out that rotation. But Auburn really had a tight handle on the rotation. Really only played about 4 or 5 receivers last season and played 3 guys the majority of the time. Camden Brown would come in to block, and that was really it. You knew if he was on the field, Auburn more than likely was running the ball. But Auburn really stuck last year with Keandre Lambert-Smith, Cam Coleman, and Malcolm Simmons. So, assuming Auburn goes by that philosophy again, and you don't see a heavy rotation, you're looking at a 4 to 5 man rotation overall. So who's going to get those final 2 spots? Assuming Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons, and Eric Singleton are your 3 starters, who's going to get those other 2 spots? I think you have 4 guys competing for that. I think Perry Thompson, Horatio Fields, Bryce Kane, and Sam Turner 4 guys competing for 2 spots. I think you'll see all 4 of those early in the year, but as that rotation starts to tighten down, I think you'll likely only see 2, assuming, big assumption, that everyone stays healthy. For me, it's hard for me not to say Sam Turner is going to be one of those 2 guys. He has been a name that's been talked about a ton throughout the spring. He's only a true freshman, but he opened some eyes. Auburn is really high on him, and as we saw last season, Hugh Freeze is not going to be afraid to play true freshman at wide receiver. So I think he's going to be a part of that mix. And then for me, it comes down to Horatio Fields and Perry Thompson. They are similar receivers to me as far as build and what they can do. Both guys that are good in one-on-one matchups, physical receivers, big play receivers. Perry Thompson had a really good A-Day. I think that was needed for him. Auburn fans want him to succeed because of his story, the recruitment of Perry Thompson, him flipping to Auburn from Alabama was a huge deal. And since then, he's been a fan favorite, and Auburn fans want to see him succeed. But he's going to have to battle to get in this rotation and to play this season with Horatio Fields. I would give the nod to Perry Thompson right now over Horatio Fields being second year in the system now. So I would say Sam Turner and Perry Thompson are probably right there at 4 and 5. But Horatio Fields is right there with Perry Thompson and Sam Turner. I do think Bryce Cain is probably the odd man out here in that group of 4 that are competing for those backup spots and those rotational spots. And one thing that's important to note, I mentioned Camden Brown, who transferred out after this past season. He played because he could block. So we focus so much on the receiving ability of Malcolm Simmons and Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton. But if Horatio Fields, if Perry Thompson, if Sam Turner, those guys can block, they're likely to find their way onto the field. So who's going to be Auburn's best blocking receiver? It's not the sexy thing to talk about, but it's very, very important for Auburn's offense. So if one of those guys really separates themselves as a blocker, which you assume Perry Thompson and Horatio Fields with their build should be able to block at a pretty high level, then therefore they could get more playing time. So that's important to note as well. But to go back to answer the question, yes, I think Malcolm Simmons will be wide receiver 3, but I am really interested in seeing what plays out behind those starting 3 receivers. Really like that question. Next question. How have Auburn's NBA players performed in the NBA playoffs so far? So many of you listening or watching may not follow the NBA, but Auburn has 2 players in the NBA playoffs. 2 guys that played for Bruce Pearl, Jabari Smith and Isaac Okoro. Now, Jabari Smith and the Houston Rockets got beat out in Game 7 by the Golden State Warriors last night. So Jabari Smith is now out of the playoffs. Isaac Okoro is the only one left, but I did want to talk about both of those guys and their success in the NBA playoffs and how they have done. Jabari Smith finished his first playoff series, his first time in the playoffs in his career, with average 7.5 points, 45% from three-point range. He played well. I'm going to go ahead and admit, look, I have some Auburn bias in here in this segment. Jabari Smith, many people believe, if you are biased towards him like I am, that he should have a bigger role, that he should have had a bigger role on this Rockets team. He was a really good defender and a really good shooter, and the Rockets, for whatever reason, did not play him as much as some thought he should play. Again, I'm not far from an expert on NBA basketball. I'm a casual fan at best of the NBA, so I take my opinion with a grain of salt. But Jabari Smith seemed like he deserved more minutes based on the way he played, the way he defended, the way he shot. The Rockets didn't utilize him as well as some thought he could. But he still did well. He was still an important piece to the Rockets team this season. And I believe he has a really bright future. I'll talk more about that in a question a little bit later on in the show. As for Isaac Okoro, the Cavs swept the Heat in their first round series. They lost, though, in their first game of the Eastern Conference semifinals last night to the Indiana Pacers. Isaac Okoro is averaging 4.5 points per game, shooting 36% from 3 and 11 minutes per game. He's not playing a ton, not playing as much as he did in the regular season as rotations do tighten down in the playoffs, but he is an important role player for the Cavs, a really, really good defender. He's a 3-and-D guy. He's been that his whole career. and he's been that for the Cavaliers this season and in the playoffs. And I wish him the best of luck the rest of the way, as he is the only Auburn player left in the playoffs. Important to mention, Chuma Okeke is on the Cavs roster as well, former Auburn player under Bruce Pearl, was part of that Final Four run in 2019, but he does not play. Isaac Okoro does, so wish them the best of luck. That's how those guys are doing. It's fun to do that and answer that question, because it's neat that Auburn's been able to put players in the NBA. Yes, Auburn has a Hall of Famer in Charles Barkley, and that is great, and that's historic. But to see multiple Auburn players in the NBA, it says a lot about Auburn's program, and again, says a lot about Bruce Pearl and what he has done for this Auburn basketball program. It all points back to Bruce Pearl, and so that's why it's fun for me to answer that question. I really appreciate that question from my friend Matthew, who asked that. He is an Indiana Pacers fan, so he will be cheering against Isaac Okoro and the Cleveland Cavaliers in this series, as the Pacers got a big win last night. Okay, next question. What is your favorite sports memory from your time at Auburn? Pertaining to me specifically here, this question was asked, what was my favorite sports memory? This is tough. This is a tough one. I wrote down a couple, and I wanted to split it up between football and basketball. Look, I watched and was in the student section for countless games at Jordan-Hare Stadium, at Neville Arena. I covered countless games at both those locations. Through my time at Weagle, I traveled to Nashville to watch Auburn play, to cover Auburn football against Vanderbilt. I traveled to Starkville to cover Auburn basketball versus Mississippi State, to Lexington, Kentucky. Got to go to Rupp Arena. Went to San Antonio for the Final Four. Those are all fantastic memories, and I was extremely blessed and thankful that I got those opportunities to do that. Thanks to Weagle and Auburn for allowing me to do that. And those were some of the best memories that I will have from college, and I will certainly never forget those. But I think my favorite for football was both of the Texas A&M games, from my freshman year and then from this past season. So my freshman year, that was Cadillac Williams, interim head coach, his first home game as interim head coach for Auburn. Auburn was bad. Auburn was really, really bad. So was Texas A&M. It was freezing. It was 40 degrees and windy that night. I covered that game. I can still remember my post-game article from that game. Super late night. Didn't get done covering it until I think 1 a.m. or so. But I remember my article after that game. And I wrote, Cadillac Williams returns joy to Auburn football. Because that's what it was. To see the energy in Jordan-Hare Stadium that night. To see the passion that Auburn fans had. The excitement that Auburn fans had. You would have never known that Auburn was, a 5-win team, or at that time a 4-win team that was having an awful season, one of the worst teams in the SEC, one of the worst teams in Power 5 that year, and to see the passion is what makes Auburn special. That Auburn could have that excitement, could have that joy for a team that was as bad as that team was. There's truly nothing like Auburn. It showed the uniqueness of Auburn, and to get to experience that firsthand as a student in my freshman year, it's a memory I'll never forget. I'll never forget the post-game press conference after seeing the happiness, the smiles on Cadillac Williams' face. I'll never forget Tank Bigsby coming in to the press conference room, not to speak, but just to watch Cadillac Williams speak at his post-game press conference. It was special. That's one of my favorite memories. And then the Texas A&M game last season. I did not cover this one. I was a student for this one. This was my last home game as an Auburn student, to get to be in the student section, for Auburn to win that game in overtime, to get to storm the field after the year before thinking that was about to happen in the Iron Bowl against Alabama, and then to lose that game in the fashion and painful as it was. The A&M game, getting to storm the field for that, did not make up for that loss, because nothing makes up for an Iron Bowl loss. But it was special. It was a great memory. It was a lot of fun. That night was a lot of fun. I'm grateful that I got to experience that with my friends, and grateful for that moment, because Auburn football wasn't great, to put it mildly. During my time as a student, it was rough. It was brutal. I sat through a lot of painful and disappointing Auburn football games. But I'm not focusing on that. I focus on the positive memories, and that Texas A&M game freshman year and the Texas A&M game this past year. Those were the memories that I will focus on and I will remember the most from my time as an Auburn student. As for favorite basketball memory, I also put 2 down. It was hard for me to come down to 2. A lot of great ones. Auburn won a ton of games in Neville Arena, so I had a lot of fun watching games in Neville Arena, covering games in Neville Arena. But my favorite memories, number 1, sophomore year, the 2023-2024 season for Auburn basketball when Auburn defeated Alabama in the Iron Bowl in Neville Arena. The reverse Rammer Jammer after that victory. Auburn dominated that game, won by double digits. A lot of fun. Neville Arena was insane. That whole game, insane environment, extremely loud. That was a lot of fun. I covered that game, but I really had a good time with that one. And then this season, the Final Four, getting to go to San Antonio and getting to cover the Final Four. I understand that Auburn lost, but the memories of getting to watch Auburn play in the Final Four, to be there in person, to get to go to the media breakout sessions throughout that week for the Thursday and Friday leading up to that game. And those are memories I will never forget, getting to be in the city of San Antonio with this whole city revolving around the Final Four and the whole experience of just being there and the fact that Auburn was there. It was special. And that would have to be my favorite basketball memory as well, those 2. So I appreciate that question, and I'm going to reminisce a little bit and reflect a little bit more as we close out the show. So we're not done looking back yet, but I did want to split that up a little bit. Okay, next question as we roll on here. This one comes from my brother. I modified it slightly, but it's basically the question he asks. The question is, who have been the top 5 Auburn football players since 2010. He asked since 2000. I changed it to 2010 because I don't like talking about things I didn't really get to watch. So if I had done since 2000, it would have been some players I really have no recollection of watching, and I didn't want to do that. But the question has a caveat. Based off of NFL production, not based on what they did at Auburn. This is based off of what they did in the NFL. So, who have been the top 5 Auburn players since 2010 based off of NFL production? This was challenging. I'll mention the honorable mentions at the end. This was challenging. I'm going to go from 5 to 1. Number 1 wasn't challenging. You all will be able to guess who number 1 is. But starting at number 5, I have Carlton Davis, a cornerback who won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. He's with New England now, played with Detroit last season. He has 380 total tackles in 7 seasons, 11 interceptions, and 84 pass deflections. He's a veteran corner now. Corners don't typically play a long time, so he's on the back half of his career. But it's been really successful. He's been one of the better corners in the NFL. He had a really good career at Auburn as well. He was a high draft pick, and he's had, in my eyes, really successful career. That 5 spot was tough. There was a lot of guys that you could have put there, but I decided to go with Carlton Davis. At number 4, Dee Ford. He played for the Chiefs and the 49ers. He is retired now. His last season was in 2021. In 2018, he was a Pro Bowler and led the NFL in forced fumbles that year. In his 6 full season career, he did play 7 seasons, but only about 7 games in those. But 6 full seasons, he had 159 total tackles, 40 sacks, and 12 forced fumbles. He was an incredible defensive end at Auburn and was a really good defensive end in the NFL. Again, a Pro Bowler in 2018. So I went with him at number 4 because of that Pro Bowl and because of his overall stats leading the NFL in forced fumbles. That 2018 year was a special one for him. At number 3, I put Derrick Brown. Derrick Brown's still fairly early into his career. He was 2023 made the Pro Bowl, 248 total tackles and 8 sacks in 4 seasons. He missed all of this past season with an injury. So these are just stats from 4 seasons. He's been a run stopper like he was at Auburn. Been very, very good defensive tackle. I think he was a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee as well, if I'm not mistaken on that. A stand-up individual and human being and a phenomenal defensive tackle in the NFL. We know how special he was at Auburn, and he's been nearly that special for the Carolina Panthers, which Carolina Panthers If you know anything about the NFL, they don't give you much to celebrate, but Derrick Brown's been a positive piece for their franchise. At number 2, I have Jamien Sherwood. I might get some disagreement on this, and I get it, but he's been one of the most productive guys out of Auburn in the NFL since 2010. In 2024, he led the NFL in solo tackles. He has 202 total tackles over 4 seasons. He was a safety at Auburn, and the Jets in the NFL bulked him up, moved him to linebacker, and he's been an excellent linebacker. They just signed him to a contract extension. I know the reason some might not have him as high. He doesn't have All-Pro honors, or he doesn't have Pro Bowl honors, but his stats are really impressive, and he's been a really good player just going off of eye test as well, just watching him play in the NFL. I had to go Jamien Sherwood here at number 2. I wouldn't argue too much with you if you had a couple of other guys maybe higher than him, but off of productivity, off of what he has accomplished, I have Jamien Sherwood at number 2. And then at number 1, this one's easy. You all know who this is. Cam Newton, 2011 Rookie of the Year, 2015 MVP, 3-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro. He has the most quarterback rushing touchdowns in NFL history with 75. That could get passed here soon by a couple of guys in the NFL. His career, in my eyes, got cut short, in large part due to the hits that he took in front of a horrible Carolina Panthers offensive line. And the rules have changed. Quarterbacks are protected much better than they were during Cam Newton's era. It was evolving during his time as the Carolina Panthers quarterback, but it is not what it is now. I think if he played in this era, he probably could have played longer. I do hate that he never won a Super Bowl. He did get to the Super Bowl, but lost to the Denver Broncos. But he had a really good career. I do think he'll end up being a Hall of Famer, and there's no debate. Since 2010, he's number 1 for Auburn players based off of NFL production, and number 1 overall based on Auburn players ever, you can make the argument for. As for honorable mentions, there are some other really good players and really productive players in the NFL since 2010 that have come out of Auburn. Honestly, if we were going off of achievements, Daniel Carlson should have been on this list. I didn't put him in my top 5 simply because he's a kicker. Not to knock Daniel Carlson, love the guy, but that was why I left him off the list. But he was a 2-time NFL scoring leader, 2-time All-Pro. He's been a phenomenal kicker for the Las Vegas Raiders. So certainly, you're just going off of accomplishments. Daniel Carlson, honestly, is probably number 2 on the list. But because he was a kicker, I decided to leave him off. So don't hate me, Daniel. I have Braden Smith as an honorable mention. He's been a starting guard for the Indianapolis Colts. He has been a solid player for them. Jamel Dean, really good player, played with Carlton Davis in Tampa Bay. Those two were together for a few years. He's been a really good player. And Derek Hall, he just had a rookie year, so he really couldn't go on that list. I do think in a couple years, if we were to redo this list, I think Derek Hall will likely be on it. Darius Slayton, wide receiver for the New York Giants, been a very productive NFL career for him. Auburn has not put a ton of receivers in the NFL, at least receivers that have had any longevity. He's been the outlier, and he's been really good for the New York Giants. I hope that he gets better quarterback play, and he can even have bigger numbers in the near future. Okay, final question of the show today. I mentioned that we would come back to Jabari Smith, and we are now. The question is, will Jabari Smith ever be an All-NBA player? So I mentioned, many folks, Houston Rocket fans, Auburn fans, believe Jabari Smith should have a bigger role. He's good enough to have a bigger role than just a 3-and-D type of player. He's too talented for that role. But I'm not sure if he stays on the Houston Rockets that he'll ever get that role. Because of the way the Houston Rockets roster is constructed, the roster centers on a couple other pieces. For you listening to the show, you're not probably interested that much in NBA, so I'm not going to go into that. But with the way the Rockets roster is constructed, I don't see Jabari Smith ever being able to fulfill that and make an All-NBA team, be an All-NBA player with the Houston Rockets with the way their roster is constructed currently. If the Rockets decide to shake things up, to make moves, and to center the team more around Jabari Smith and his skill set, then yes, he absolutely can be an All-NBA player with his talent, with his potential. He's still only 21 years old. I know he's been in the NBA for a couple years. He played 1 year at Auburn and was gone, was a lottery pick, number 3 pick in the NBA draft. So people think he's a veteran. He's really not. That guy still has sky-high potential. I think in the right situation, with the right team around him, in the right system, Jabari Smith can be an All-NBA player. But will he get that opportunity? I don't know. I certainly hope he does. I'm rooting for him. I want him to have all the success in the world, just like Walker Kessler and Isaac Okoro and Chuma Okeke and all these guys from Auburn that go to the NBA. Want them to have success on the biggest of stages. So I hope that Jabari Smith can be an All-NBA player. I think he can be, but it'll take the right system and the right fit. Okay, let's do our sports roundup, and then we will kind of close out the show for today. But this was a big weekend for Auburn athletics. Another really good weekend for Auburn softball and for Auburn baseball. Auburn softball closed out the regular season, swept North Carolina State in a series, had a walk-off win yesterday for Senior Day. So congratulations to them. They will open the SEC tournament on Tuesday night against Alabama in the SEC tournament. Won't that be fun? Auburn is the last seed in the SEC tournament. However, they still have the chance to make a NCAA regional. All 15 teams from the SEC in softball could end up making an NCAA regional. That would be insane, but it is possible. However, Auburn probably needs to go and win a game or two to really feel good about their chances of making a region. But this will be a really big deal. Again, this is the first season for co-head coaches Chris and Kate Malvo. This has been a rebuilding year for Auburn, but they've accomplished some really good things this year. I'll be interested to see what they can do in the SEC tournament. As for Auburn baseball, man, what a weekend it was. If you didn't follow this, if you didn't watch these games, let me just show you or tell you what went on this weekend in Knoxville. So this was supposed to be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday series like most are in the SEC. Auburn goes up there on Friday night. It's pouring rain in Knoxville. Tennessee has a turf field besides the pitcher's mound. They decide to try to play this game. They played the top of the first inning. Ike Irish hits a 2-run home run. Auburn goes up 2-0. They go out there to try to start at the bottom of the first inning, and the umpires call the game off. Game goes into delay and is ultimately postponed to Saturday. But the game had already started. But Auburn starter, Sam Dutton, never threw a pitch in the bottom of the first inning. Tennessee's starter did. And the way baseball is, people are finicky with their pitchers, so Tennessee did not want to throw their ace again on Saturday, even though he'd only thrown half an inning against Auburn. So Auburn was at a major advantage, the fact that they had their ace still in Sam Dutton able to go on Saturday, whereas Tennessee did not. They resumed this game in the bottom of the first. Auburn goes on to win Game 1 rather comfortably over Tennessee. Then they play Game 2 on Saturday as well. This game ends up going to extra innings. It gets into the 10th inning, and then it gets delayed. So Auburn, that game does not get to resume on Saturday. So Game 2 is almost completely played, but they aren't able to finish it. They finish it on Sunday. Auburn ends up losing that game. Tennessee walks it off. And then they play Game 3 of the series. They make it a 7-inning game, and Auburn dominates that game against Tennessee and takes 2 out of 3 of the series. The mental toughness, the way Auburn handled adversity, to be on the road, to face delays, postponements, starting games over on another day after you've already played the majority of the game or played a half inning of the game. You're probably like, I don't know what inning is. I don't know what score it is. I just know I'm playing baseball. That's kind of the mindset that you have to go with in those situations. And hats off to Butch Thompson. Hats off to this Auburn baseball team for their resiliency and the way they played against a good Tennessee team. This Auburn baseball team is really good. They are really, really good. There are 2 SEC series left. Auburn will have its final home SEC series of the regular season this weekend against South Carolina. Then they will travel to Ole Miss. The team's in a really good spot to host a regional and is pushing to host a super regional now. If you're able to get through a regional, Auburn needs to be a top 8 seed to be able to host a super regional as well. They're in position to be in position, as is often said. But these final 2 SEC series will be very, very important. Auburn cannot let their foot off the gas. They've accomplished so much. They've won 8 of their last 10 SEC series, but they can't let up now. You're really, really close to putting yourself in a really good position for the postseason, but it's not over yet. But congrats to Auburn baseball. They're doing a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series this weekend against South Carolina at Plainsman Park. Okay, let's get into our final wrap-up here of the show. I had a question about this. I was already planning to address it. So you might be wondering, okay, Carson, you're graduating, so what's going to happen to Talkin Toomers? What's going to happen to this show? Honestly, there won't really be any changes to this show. I am graduating, yes. I am graduating in psychology, and I'm going to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I'm still going to be working for Auburn University, and therefore I will continue to be able to use this studio, to be able to use Weagle, to be able to record this podcast, which I'm very, very, very grateful for. Cannot thank Weagle enough for the opportunity to continue to do this show. Cannot thank Weagle enough the fact that I've been able to do this show over the last 3 years, and thankful to Auburn. So yes, this show is really not going to change very much. The only change is really this will be from a perspective of an Auburn student to a perspective of a recent Auburn alum. That's really the only change. For the most part, this show will continue to be what it's been. And if you're not sure what this show is, this is your first time listening, well, now will be a good time for me to explain to you once again what I try to do. I haven't done this in a while. I try to provide a different perspective. Look, you can get 100 different podcasts. You can get 1,000,000 different podcasts on Auburn sports that are very similar, that are going to be talking about the same things, and we're all talking about the same subjects, of course, because you're limited. It is Auburn athletics at the end of the day, and it is mostly Auburn football and basketball, but I try to provide a unique and a different perspective. I don't look for hot takes. I'm not looking to get clicks. That's not what this show is about. The minute the show turns into that is the minute I stop doing it. That's never what I want to be. I want to give you context of a situation. I want to give you both sides of a situation, and then I want to give you my opinion on it. I try to be honest. I try to look at things with as clear of a view as I can, like all of us. I have my own biases, or whatever the plural bias is. But I try to give you my opinion, my educated opinion, the best that I can, and I try to give you something different than you can hear with any other numerous Auburn podcasts. There's a lot of great ones out there, but I try to provide a unique perspective, and I think I do a pretty good job at that. I'm always looking to improve. I want this show to continue to grow. That is my goal. I want this to be the top podcast for Auburn sports, for Auburn athletics. I want people, when they think of Auburn athletics and what podcasts they like to listen to in regards to Auburn basketball and Auburn football, I want them to think about Talkin Toomers. I have a long way to go to get there. I understand that, but I'm going to continue to work to make this the best show that I can make it and continue to improve each time I get behind this mic. And I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your support. As for my life plans, my career plans, if you're interested in that, I mentioned that I will be graduating in psychology. This isn't a career for me. This is a passion of mine. And Weagle has given me the opportunity to live out this passion, to do this. I've had a version of a YouTube/podcast show, if you know me, if you've listened to me, since I was in middle school. Something I really enjoyed doing, and I still enjoy doing. And as long as I'm able to do it, as long as I have the time to do it, I will continue to do this show. And I'm so grateful that Auburn and Weagle have given me that opportunity. But I will be pursuing a master's in clinical mental health counseling. That is my career. This is not my career, but it is a passion and it is a hobby of mine. And I do take a lot of pride in this. And as I mentioned, I look to be the best that I can be in this. So if you will, go with me here for a second and allow me to reminisce a little bit, allow me to reflect, and allow me to give some thank yous out. This is going to sound like this show is ending. It's really not. I'll be back here. We won't have a show next week, but I will be back here in 2 weeks because I'll be working, like I mentioned, for Auburn. We'll have a show throughout the summer, and it'll still keep going. So this is going to sound like the show is ending. It's not. It's just this chapter of my life is ending, and I just wanted to take the moment to reflect a little bit on my past 3 years here at Auburn. I'm graduating a year early, so it got cut short a little bit, my time as a student. I'm not upset about that. I'm happy about that. I'm glad to be progressing in life. One of the quotes that I don't really like, but I do recite often, is the only constant in life is change. I don't like change. I'm very much all about routine. It's very important to me. I keep a routine, and I adhere to it pretty strictly, but I understand change is part of life, and I'm excited about the next stages of life. I'm excited for what is to come in my career and for this show. But allow me to reflect just for a moment on these past 3 years. I just want to say thank you to Auburn. I want to say thank you to Weagle. I want to say thank you to everyone who has listened and supported this show and made this show possible. I couldn't do it without the support that I get. I think of listeners like my grandmother, who has listened to every single episode from start to finish, no matter how bad or how uninteresting a certain topic may have been to her, or she knew nothing about the topic. That didn't stop her from listening. I appreciate that. I appreciate all my friends that listen, all my family that listens. I appreciate all of you that I may not know that listen to this show and have supported this show, and I hope that you will continue to listen to this show in the months to come as this show continues to evolve, and I hope as we continue to improve this show. And as I reflect on my time at Auburn, look, Auburn was my dream school. I know many people might have a dream school going to an Ivy League school or going out west somewhere. From the time I was really 4 years old, I fell in love with Auburn, and there wasn't anywhere else that I wanted to go. I had dreams of playing college baseball for Auburn. Of course, that did not happen at 5'9" and not very athletic. But I still got to come to Auburn. I still got to live out the dreams. I got to do this show, got to do this podcast, something I'm extremely passionate about. I got to cover Auburn football, Auburn basketball. I got to be just mere feet and inches away from Bruce Pearl and Janai Broom and Jarquez Hunter and some fantastic players who come through Auburn. Got to ask those guys questions, got to be in rooms with those guys, got to be in the student section, got to go to San Antonio to cover the Final Four. I got to go to Lexington, Kentucky, to Rupp Arena. I got to go to Nashville, Tennessee, to Starkville, Mississippi, just to name a couple. I'm incredibly blessed and incredibly thankful for those opportunities, for those experiences, and I created more memories than I could have ever hoped for and imagined, and they're memories I will never, ever forget and never take for granted, and I never will forget how blessed I am. I remind myself that each and every day. I'm so blessed that I have parents and family that supported me and allowed me to come to Auburn, to live out my dream of attending Auburn, to eventually graduate from Auburn this upcoming Sunday, and to become an Auburn man. I am so, so grateful and so blessed for that and for my time here at Auburn, and absolutely love this university and thankful for everything this university and all the opportunities that have been provided to me by Auburn. So that's how I wanted to conclude this show. I appreciate you all allowing me to reflect today, allowing me to get out all my thank yous to my mom, to my dad, to my grandparents, to my brother, to my friends, and to you, the listener, the watcher, whether it's the podcast or on YouTube. Thank you. Thank you so, so much for supporting this show, for listening and watching Talkin Toomers, and your support over these last several years. The show isn't ending. It will continue. To this date, we have recorded over 100 episodes of Talkin Toomers. It started on live radio. It is now podcast only and on YouTube. I've written over 100 articles as well for Weagle, and we're not stopping. We're going to continue. We're just moving to a new stage. I'm moving to a new stage in life, and the show will continue to evolve and hopefully continue to improve. And I hope that you will continue to listen or watch Talkin Toomers. And thank you all again so much. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another edition and a slightly new chapter of Talkin Toomers. So I cannot wait to be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I am Carson Horn. Thank you for listening to Talkin Toomers. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe and follow @Talkin Toomers on social media so you'll never miss an episode. War Eagle.